We're going to talk a bit about extended body flies today. Bobby Popovic's, Blaine Chocolate, Greg Senyo, all use different kinds of things to extend the length of the bodies out. Some flies are made with single, very stiff extensions, or one little piece to let it swivel and move. Some are made very wide with lots of pieces where they bend. Some are more fish-like, but all of them share the same thing. A lot of length, a lot of motion, and the motion is caused by more density of material up in the front, so that the thinner rear end is in an eddy and moves around back and forth. Bobby Popovich uses stiff monofilament. He also uses Blaine Chocolate's little vertebrae type things. They're little metal clips that are designed to replace what used to be called Waddington shanks by Partridge Company when they made them. Those were heavy metal connectors that we used in salmon flies, and Greg Senyo makes a replacement for that today, used for the intruder style of steelhead flies. I'm using Cortland braided monofilament. I prefer the 30-pound test because it's easier to work with. And this is an old spool. The new advertising will look a little different, but they show you how to make loops in it right on the back of the package. To form loops, you can use a tapestry needle, which is not sharp on the front end. It's not something that'll make holes on your fingers. And by inserting it into the braided monofilament, which we will attempt to do here on camera, tough getting old and having arthritis. Trick is to get it into the mono but not through it. So you want it in the monofilament and run it for 3/4 of an inch or an inch inside and pull it out again. Now you have this great big eye here on the end, and you can take the end of the mono in a tapestry needle like this, stick it through like that, and by holding the needle and pulling on it, you fold the end up and by pulling the needle through, you pull the braided mono out the side. Then you can adjust the loop to the length that you want and the size that you want. Take a pair of nice sharp heavy-duty scissors, cut the mono off, give it a little bit of a pull, and you have a nice solid loop. You always want to put a little cement on there. However, if you want to create something that becomes a segment in a fly and you want loops on both ends, then you take the mono and cut it a bit, and you can make this segment any length you want it to be. And that's done the same way, approaching from the other end, sliding the needle up inside. Now you can slide this as far as you want. You can slide it up inside where you've already gotten the braid doubled. Slide it out through the side. Line it up so that the eye is in the same plane as the loop that you've already created, if you want them exactly the same, both ends. Stick the monofilament through. Pull that needle down through. Comes out the side again. Do exactly the same bit. And there you have two loops, one on each end, a completed segment, except for one step. A little bit of head cement on the doubled portion, thin enough so that it runs in there, and not only is it locked in place because of the Chinese finger type of tension, the braid upon itself, but this stuff seeps in there and locks it tightly, and it is never going to move. Oh, let's use this technique and make an eel fly so that we can show something that will move and is a simple design so that you don't have a lot of materials that have to be doubled over or other sorts of things. To create the eel fly, we start with this body segment that is braided on both sides. What I'm going to do is use clear monofilament thread, hold this right here by one of the loops, and I'm going to make about 5 turns of thread or so around the braided mono right next to the loop. A couple turns around it to bind the thread in place, and then another couple of loops. And then I'm going to half hitch it. And the easiest way to do that is to just twist the thread around your fingers a couple times and drop it right where you, after you slide it over the end, just drop it right down. And it's half hitched, so now I have all my extra thread there. And I can take a pair of scissors and cut that waste piece of thread right off, assuming I can find this nice clear monofilament with my scissors. We'll cheat and use the scissors with the bigger finger loops. Okay, so we have tying thread attached to the braid. If I wanted to, I could put this in my vise to start off. And I'm going to do that just so you can see a little easier, because my fingers won't be in the way. So if we take this loop of mono and stick it in there, it's just like having a hook. I'm going to take some black bear hair and take these nice heavy-duty scissors again. Cut a piece off. And there's a lot of underfur in black bear, real dense stuff. So I have a little comb, and I'm going to comb this stuff out of here. And you can see it building up on the comb. A lot of it. And it's really wiry stuff. It's very much like seal fur. And in fact, you may not want to throw it away because it can be very useful as dubbing for certain things. I let this hair then sort of spread out a little bit. Place it around the braid and take a loose loop. And you can see that it's easy to manipulate and get all the way around the loop that I've got on the back end here. You can probably see that pretty well. I'm then going to do exactly the same thing as I did before. And hopefully I don't keep moving this out of your field of view. But a couple of twists in the thread, pull it tight. And just let it slide down right around the place where we've got it tied off. Got a half hitch there. I've got way too much hair. So the simplest thing to do is take these big scissors, just slide it in from the other end, and cut off the excess. You can do it because this braided monofilament is flexible, and you can just push it out of the way with the scissor blade and not worry about cutting into it or dulling your scissors on it, and you can just cut off all the excess. Leaves you with a much neater bundle, and it works better if you don't cut it. But we'll fix that because we had a half hitch there. It didn't come loose. And the whole approach here is to then continue to make segments to cover this right up to the loop eye in the front. Having done that a couple of times, you end up with something like this. And if you pull back the hair, you can see that the loop is still existent in the back. Now, to continue making as many segments as you want in this fly, you take another piece of this braided monofilament, simply slip it through like so. And then take your needle oops. Getting old is not for sissies, I guess. Get the needle up inside, out through the side. Now, taking this looped end, we go right back to where we were before, forming the loop, pulling the end through. Oops. Definitely have a case of the dropsies today. Well, we have our first segment all complete and attached to the second segment, and you continue doing the same thing. Holding this, you add bare hair, it overhangs the loop-to-loop connection. You repeat it again, it overhangs, and if you have too much of this hanging out, you could even do it a third time. I've made these segments nice and short. 2 applications is probably all you would need. To end up with something like this. Now 2 segments together. Gives you quite a bit of length, but no hook. Well, we certainly have a way to solve that. And we can get fancy, and I'll even get my vise now. And what I have here is a 2-aught Mustad 34007. I'm going to take my tying thread and just open spiral wrap right down so that the thread is hanging just behind the point of the hook. Cut off the excess. And I'm going to repeat what I just did. I'm going to stick an end through. I'm going to take my needle and hopefully not struggle. Less struggling this time. Yay! Got way too much here. We'll just cut off a little bit out of the way. Through the eye of the needle. Yeah. Having done that, I can then attach this loop to loop on the hook shank. All nice. The camera managed to shut itself off with no real reason. So in the interim, I put some bare hair on the hook shank, and now we're going to make the bullet-shaped head, which is going to sort of look like that. And it's done with few inches of easy body braid, which you simply slip over the hook shank like that, right over the eye, and you tie it nice and securely in the rear. Now, having this braid draped over the outside of the thread draped over the outside of the braid won't matter, because you're not going to see anything once we lacquer all this. So if I push this back like so and pull it right back at the eye, I can just take the thread and bring it forward and catch it like that. And there is the shape of your head, with the hair underneath pulled back and blending with the rest of this nice movable body. And it's simply a matter of finishing the head, tying it off, cutting the excess, and making it the color, more or less, of the bear hair. A black Sharpie marker accomplishes that very nicely. And you get a little shine coming through. Anyway, now, to finish this, not wanting the poor eel to be blind, not that it would really matter to the fish a whole lot, we take some 3/16 epoxy eyes, put them in place on the sides, manipulate them a little bit so that they're more or less opposite each other. And then take some UV lacquer and coat everything pretty well, because there's nothing on the braid. The eyes should not, I hope, move around on me. You could really see how this builds up just watching it as you apply it. And you want it to build up pretty well. Coat everything, but build up pretty well around the eyes and over the eyes, because you don't want them to come off. That would require stopping to do repairs. And we really don't want to stop for anything. And we want the fly to last, because it does take time to make it. And we don't want to have to repeat that. So we give it the usual 20 seconds or so of drying time. You can see all your sins when you're doing this. There's one strand of chartreuse deer here that found its way into that black, and I can really see it real well with this blue light. But I'm not going to worry about it, because once I take this light off, it really won't be visible at all. Once that's done, the usual sticky coating will be there. So we take a little bit of head cement and coat everything. Actually see one bit of hair that's where it's not supposed to be. That's one of the things that putting this coating on does. It really makes those stand out. You can just pull it right out of there. And you just let that set up. You can make the heads varied sizes depending on how tight you pull the braid, or whether you use a smaller or a larger braid. The net result is all the same. The fly is very lightweight because none of this weighs anything. The heaviest part is the hair, and that doesn't weigh much. So you're really casting the weight of a 2-aught hook and very little else. There's very little wind resistance with this eel. There's just not a lot of material here to interfere, so you can throw this with an 8-weight rod. Okay, there are lots of other things that you can do with this type of a design that are not necessarily available to you with other types of extended bodies. One, because there's a loop here at the base of the tail, which was part of the design, you can stick a hook up through that loop, tie a piece of monofilament to the hook, and tie that off to the next loop forward, and you have a stinger hook built right in and removable. Also, you can insert a piece of lead into the braid either before or after you form the section to weight that particular section, so that if one of the portions of the fly needs to be designed so it's heavier than the others, and so it could ride with a tail down attitude or something like that, then that's easily done by putting lead inside. Also, in the instance where you want a very light fly, like this worm pattern, which I modified from Mill's design, you can take a very light wire hook, saltwater type, attach a piece of braid to the front of it securely with the loop, replacing the eye of the hook, and reduce the weight of this fly so that it will float very effectively, and perhaps better than it would with a long shank hook. If you can think of any other things that you might apply to this, I'd like to hear from you. Certainly this is an effort in its infancy, and we're just beginning to find out what we can do with braided body segments.